One year can change a lot. For today's guest, it meant stepping into leadership when the path forward wasn't clear, and helping Gardner-Webb hold steady in a season of change at a time when higher education itself feels unsettled. This is a conversation about what it means to lead when the moment calls for it. Our guest is President Nate Evans, and this is the Bulldog Mindset. Welcome to the Bulldog Mindset, a podcast about the people, purpose, and academic work that bring Gardner-Webb University to life. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Pillar, Assistant Provost for Academic Affairs, coming to you from the historic Elliott House here on the beautiful Boiling Springs, North Carolina campus of Gardner-Webb University. Today's episode is a special one as we welcome President Nate Evans to the studio. We're talking at a meaningful moment in the life of the university. Just over a year ago, President Evans stepped into the role of interim president during a season of significant transition. This fall, after a national search, the interim was removed and he became Gardner-Webb's 14th president. In this conversation, we're going to look back at the past year, what it's like to lead through so much change, and what it means to move forward now with a longer horizon and clear sense of direction. We'll also get to know a little bit more about the person behind the title along the way. President Evans, welcome to the Bulldog Mindset.
Thanks so much. Excited to be here.
Well, let's kick it off. Tell us a little bit about your journey to Gardner-Webb. What drew you to this campus and to this university?
Sure. So started looking at Gardner-Webb in 2020 in the middle of dreaded C word, COVID, if you've heard of that, and made the transition in October of 2020. But to your question of what drew me to Gardner-Webb, I'd say it's twofold. The first is the mission alignment of this place. I believe in higher education. I think it's extremely important, and Gardner-Webb does that so well, but does it from a Christian lens. And so the mission alignment there was important to me. The other side is more in the business world, if you will, and I saw the potential for Gardner-Webb. Tremendous legacy at Gardner-Webb, the history, the stories you hear, the people, but there's room to expand and grow in different ways. And so you always want to bet on something that's going to be successful, and I think Gardner-Webb is one of those places.
Since your arrival, is there anything that's caught you off guard or surprised you?
So when I was interviewing, I specifically remember, asking the questions, trying to learn and different things about, tell me what's special about Gardner-Webb and why, and you'd always hear the people and the community and the small feel, and sometimes those can be taglines at universities. You'll hear in admissions presentations, you're not just a number, you're a name. And you hear it so many times it becomes cliche, but here at Gardner-Webb, the people are what make it special. And you'll hear that visiting, touring, whatever it might be. But until you get here, it wasn't surprising in that I had not been told about it, but you don't understand the depth of it until you actually get here, that's for sure.
Now, you have experience in higher ed prior to coming to Gardner-Webb. Since you've arrived, you were first vice president for advancement before moving into the presidency. The experiences that you've had, your education, going through the years, from your point of view, how has that prepared you for the role that you had when you first got here, as well as the role you have now?
Yeah. So I like to refer to myself as a jack of all trades, a master of none, right? And when you look at my resume, oftentimes you can see it seems a little bit pinball. And I remember at times in my career going, what's next? You didn't wake up in the third grade going to career day saying, I want to be a university president one day. You didn't wake up saying, I want to be a VP for advancement and go dressed in a suit to that career day. And what I've learned through that process is you have to trust God's calling and where he leads you. And be careful if you pray for opening doors or closing doors, because sometimes you might end up being a university president when you didn't plan to. And so, but again, back to your question about how do you get here, what do you learn, and how does it prepare you? That wide array of experiences, when I stepped into this president role, you're working with 8 different main components of this campus, all vastly different, ranging from campus safety to operations to student experience to dining, all the way to the other end of the spectrum with athletics and academics and the other areas. And so having that broad understanding that's maybe an inch deep or 2 inches deep and a mile wide was really helpful in trying to wrap your mind around such a complex organization like Gardner-Webb.
Well, two things you said in there that stuck with me. One, it's very common across higher ed. The number of people I talk with where that was not their original goal. Whether it was in high school or even in their early days of going to school, college, it wasn't that I'm going to become a professor. I'm going to become a director of this or a VP of that. But yet, obviously, people find their calling, navigate, gravitate towards that. And so definitely glad that path led you to Gardner-Webb. The other thing was the quote you mentioned, the jack of all trades, master of... Recently, are you aware of the full quote?
No.
So the full quote is, I think it's jack of all trades, master of none is still better than a master of one.
Okay.
So we often use that quote as in like it's ideal to be a master, not necessarily jack of all trades,
right?
But in reality, it's if you look at the full quote in its context, it means something a little bit different.
Well, and I think that speaks to education institutions like Gardner-Webb, liberal arts institutions, right? The whole point of a liberal arts foundation, and there's probably a more poetic way to say this, but is to expose you to different experiences and different ideas so that you can think critically. And when you can look at it from those different lenses, I've got experience in the small business. That is completely different than most days in a higher education institution, but it allows you to think just a little bit differently. To me, that's no different than somebody sitting through an art class or a theater class, something in the arts, even though you're a science major. It allows you to see something through a slightly different lens to kind of broaden that horizon, if you will.
Well, and that's where general education oftentimes gets sort of a bad rap with, so many young students in their early days just want to focus on what that major is, what that the outcome is, and it's students and former students I've had. It's not until years later after they graduate that if I happen to bump into them or talk with them, that they're likely to bring up a class outside of their major and just how much it resonated with them.
There's a maturity in that it's not just about chasing the degree. And again, that is important. That is a milestone we measure. But it's about the educational journey and that pathway to that degree that again, changes your life.
Now, as Vice President for Advancement, you're part of the senior cabinet working closely with the president and other vice presidents. So, from that lens, you're familiar with the role, but then, wow, you find yourself actually in the role. In that first week, anything that really caught you off guard or unexpected?
I would say it was the thing that caught me off guard the most was the pace and the weight of it so quickly. It was instantly, okay, day one. And I specifically remember a meeting that I had 2 cabinet members in. There was an IT issue that we had to solve, and it was pretty urgent. And it was, hey, congratulations, you're in the seat. Within hours, here's a major decision that has major financial implications, major operational implications. And by the way, you don't get to go Google this and figure it out. Here's the details. Here's what we need to do. And we've got to make a decision here in the next 24, 48 hours. And that was a really humbling experience because the whole thing was surreal the way it happened. Again, there was no job application. There was no interview process. There was no prepping for this in any way. But to be there in that first day, here's this major decision. And of course, that has continued day to day to day to day, all along the way. But that's a quick hit in the face of, okay, we've got this tiger by the tail. Don't let go. And we've got a good team. We've got great people around the table, and that's what really leads to the success. My job is not to make all of those decisions. It's to bring the people together and lead us into those decisions. And so, but yeah, that was probably the biggest surprise right off the bat. And you and I have worked on a couple things, and we're coming up on accreditation and different issues. And again, being in advancement, you're exposed to a lot of this. It's kind of back to the jack of all trades. You know a little bit about every department, but you have your industry experts, and you just got to learn to sit down with those folks and trust them and trust their guidance. They're in those positions for reasons. Mm.
Well, speaking of the team around you, in the first couple weeks, months, there was a lot of other transitions going on here at Gardner-Webb. And very quickly, you found yourself with a cabinet with a number of folks who had interim VP in their title. Did that impact how you led during your interim 10-year time period as president?
Yes and no. I think it impacted the outcomes. It didn't change the way we led or the way we acted. Everybody that's been around that table at any point, either the literal table or the metaphorical table, is committed to Gardner-Webb. They're good people. They're qualified. And whether that's person A or person B, we're still there to deploy those resources, if you will, and those skills and that knowledge. And so it didn't really change it. I do think it brought a different sense of humility and collaboration because, in a way, you're in the same boat. I wasn't in this position 2 weeks ago. They weren't in that position 2 weeks ago. We've seen it from a different lens. Okay, let's take a breath. Let's understand this. What are you seeing? What does your, again, experience and skills tell you? Here's what I'm seeing in the direction we need to go. But did it change anything? Not really.
Well, and what you're speaking of, I could see how that helped with just even the teamwork of the cabinet and just how they work together as well. But for the university as a whole, what was your approach to keeping people focused and steady when there was a lot, whether you want to call it temporary or just transitional? That's an art to try to navigate that. How did you do that?
You got to focus on the mission and the purpose. When you look across if I were to lay out all of our staff and employees across campus, you've got staff, you've got faculty, those are your two kind of main cohorts. Their day-to-day doesn't often change because a president changes. Now, yes, the strategic plans, the verbiage we use, there's variation in that. But from a Tuesday to a Wednesday, if it was President A or President B or Vice President A or Vice President B, for the most part, there's not drastic change. And I think the big piece there is, number one, reminding everybody that this institution is a whole working being. It's not one person. But also, let's go back to what we're here for, what our mission is, and we all need to be rowing in that same direction. And as a leader coming in, your job isn't necessarily to change the direction people are rowing in. It's to make sure we're rowing together. And so much of this campus, we were rowing together already. Now it's just to come in, let's keep that, to use the metaphor, the rhythm of it, keep them rowing in the same direction at the same pace. And honestly, that started with, let's just take a breath. Let's stop for a second. We talked a minute ago about, oh my gosh, here's a decision we have to make on first day. But many of those decisions I've learned, you can also sit on them for a day or two. There are so many decisions at this institution that are not emergency decisions that the place has to be on fire for us to make that decision. And so let's stop. We're moving in the same direction. We've got good people. We've got qualified people around the different tables at the university. And let's just keep doing our work in our day-to-day. And good things will happen. There's a lot of sports analogies. You do the basics right, you can win a lot of ball games that way. University is no different. So
important, and I could definitely see how for the university there's times where it can be real easy to quickly go to panic or we have to make a decision, and but no, hold up, let's take a breath. In the academic space, a former colleague of mine was infamous for saying there's no such thing as an academic emergency. Yeah. So when there would be people coming with a sense of, this has got to be figured out, well, that's an academic. Let's take a breath. We can.
For anybody that's listening to this, I did not say that.
Okay, so interim, and then this fall, national search, you become the 14th president of Gardner-Webb. Now that you have a longer horizon view out there, what feels different about the way that you think and approach the work ahead?
Yeah, so we're in a really good spot. We've built a really good team, and getting to turn the page from some of that reactive activity to strategic planning and thinking. And it's exciting. We just had a meeting with Cabinet where we're starting to discuss what is Gardner-Webb's core values. Our core values are what we're going to stand on. And again, this isn't going to be some drastic change from what we've ever talked about before, but can we define it? Can we point to it? Can we hold our staff and our students and the community to that standard? And if we can't clearly define that and who we are, how are we going to grow? And if we did at that point, it would be pure luck, right? And so we don't want to fall into success by happenstance. We want to have it strategically planned and intentional. And so working on that, moving, the next step will be turning and looking at our 10-year forecast. Where do we want to be in 10 years? And at that point, we kind of have our bookends, our core values to our 10-year plan. We can start drafting out what the strategic plan looks like. And that's a methodical and intentional process. It does involve feedback and communication across campus. But this is setting our targets and our metrics. Everybody talks about SMART goals. This is our way to do that. And so to your question of how is it transitioning, we're going a lot now from filling those interim positions, that kind of reactive, this person retired, that person left, how do we fill those positions, to, okay, we're in a good place, we're financially stable, we've got good people around the table, we're defining who we are. Let's start building and crafting that master plan, that strategic plan, and let's go after it. And that's exciting.
Well, and doing that work in quote unquote good times is a lot. It's challenging and takes a lot of effort and hard work. But today, the landscape that we're in, that higher ed is in, it's a bit different. And we're in a time where leading a university is becoming increasingly demanding. The average tenure of a president, going back about 15 years, was about 8+ years. Mm-hmm. Now where it's less than 6 years. Mm-hmm. So what made this role at this moment feel worth saying yes to?
I'd go back to two pieces on that. One is my personal belief and faith is God calls us to where we need to be when we need to be. As I mentioned earlier, I could not have planned for this to happen. There's no roadmap. If you'd asked me even I'd say a year and a half ago, because I was an interim right at a year ago, would you ever be a college president? I probably would have laughed at you. And many people that I know would have laughed at you as well, if I'm being honest. But I do think it's a calling. I do think God has put me here for some reason. And I'm going to chase that as hard as I can and do the best that we can do. The other piece is kind of back to why I chose Gardner-Webb in the first place, is the potential of this place. We do amazing things, great things. We have a rich heritage. Acknowledge all of that 100%. There's still meat on this bone, and we've got some really good opportunities and exciting things ahead of us.
As president, you noted, having to keep an eye and just work in a number of different areas throughout university operations. As an academic in academic affairs, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about the academic
That's
experience. Thinking about the academic experience at Gardner-Webb, what do you see that we need to do to meet the needs and to deliver the education that today's student, the modern learner, requires?
I'm going to steal this from something I heard somebody say the other day that I liked, and it was rigorous, relevant, and rooted. We're going to go with the 3 R's there. And, growth requires rigor. I'm an exercise science major from my undergrad, and so stressing those muscles and creating rigor is how those muscles grow, if I use that analogy there. And I think that goes the same for a student's learning experience. It's got to be relevant. It does us no good to get a degree and teach somebody a skill if they don't have a reason to apply that skill. And so especially in 2020, now 2026, job placement is so important in being able to provide a valuable skill through that education. And then rooted, why do we do it? We just talked about core values a moment ago, and we want students that are not just lifelong learners, that not just get a job, but they're doing it because they're pursuing their calling, because they're using their God-given talents, and they're making the world a better place in their own way.
I love that. I think we're going to see some posters soon that say rigorous, relevant, and rooted. This is a great conversation. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll learn more about the man behind the title, behind the president, as well as his thoughts on leadership, mission, and what the next chapter of Gardner-Webb looks like.
For many students, financial struggles aren't just a temporary inconvenience. They can be the deciding factor between continuing their education or stepping away. Bulldog Cares was created to ensure that unexpected financial burdens don't force students to put their dreams on hold or walk away from their future. This fund assists students in covering urgent needs such as medical expenses, housing insecurity, transportation, food, and essential academic costs. Eligible students who are approved may receive financial assistance annually, providing a crucial safety net during challenging times. The application is simple, and Gardner-Webb staff are ready to help students navigate the process with care and understanding. However, Bulldog Cares relies on donor support to continue serving students in need. A single contribution can mean the difference between a student staying in school or having to pause their education. When you give to Bulldog Cares, you're directly impacting a student's future, offering stability and the opportunity to complete their degree. This program is more than financial aid. It's a testament to Gardner-Webb's values of community, passion, and support. If you need help or want to be a part of a student success story, Bulldog Cares is here to offer relief and hope. Students, don't hesitate. Apply today. And donors, be the change. Visit gardner-webb.edu/bulldog-cares.
Welcome back to the Bulldog Mindset. I'm Greg Pillar, your host, coming to you from the Gardner-Webb podcast studio in Boiling Springs, North Carolina. Today we've been talking with President Nate Evans, the 14th president of Gardner-Webb University, about his first year in leadership, what it was like to step into the presidency during a season of transition, and how he's thinking about the future of the university. Now let's get to know the man a little bit more and understand a little bit more about the vision looking ahead to the coming years for Gardner-Webb. President Evans, you've in your time, both as interim and now permanently in the role, you've talked about One Webb, about building unity across campus. What does that actually look like in practice?
Yeah, so I'm going to take a half step back, if I can use some liberty here, on how we kind of came up with that slogan. And it was standing actually just outside your office, Dr. Pillar, and we had decided at one of the upcoming events we wanted to pass out T-shirts, and we wanted a slogan on the back of it, something that visually demonstrated that unity. And so we batted around a couple different ideas. Julie in your office helped get some designs put together with some creative folks, and long story short, we landed on that One Webb, and the idea was, in a time of transition, we can't be fractured. We talked about that a little bit earlier, of we still have a mission to do. There's no time to sit around and wait, and the best way to move forward is together. And so we sat around, thought about some ideas, and came up with that messaging, and we're able to give those shirts out and really capture that in a visual way. And but what does it look like in practice is kind of what I was saying of, we still have a mission, we still have a focus. We're here for these students, we're here for our mission, and we're here for each other. And, you know, you always go back to the rowing analogy. If we're rowing in the same direction, we're going to be very successful and much more efficient at it. And so for me, it's knocking down silos. It's not academic affairs and athletics and finance. This is Gardner-Webb. We are one institution. We are one Webb. And we're all connected, and we all must work together. And what I've learned a lot of times when we have those silos, it's not that one party cares and one party doesn't. It's just we're not together. We're not going in the same direction together. We may even be going in the same direction. We just haven't done it together. And so let's knock down those silos. Let's sit down and have a cup of coffee, either metaphorically or literally, and let's talk through how we can create unity and togetherness with that. And that's really where the whole thing came from. And, you know, it helps you prioritize and focus where you need to focus.
Well, it's so important. You know, at larger universities, it's very common for institutions to become siloed. Mm-hmm. That's common, in many cases, maybe even expected. But surprisingly, that can happen at smaller institutions. Mm-hmm. And so it's important to, you know, one, identify, you know, when that kind of activity is occurring, but two, you're right, in order to you know, coming back to what you said about focused on the mission and purpose, to achieve that, having more of a unified approach is definitely critical.
Mm-hmm.
In that
Absolutely.
Role. Now, we've also tossed the term transition around quite a bit so far in our conversation, and mentioned earlier about the other interim roles in the cabinet that were there. Now, as president, you know, one thing that's a little bit unique, though not necessarily uncommon, for a new president stepping into that role, is, you know, you've had the opportunity to fill some of those mm-hmm. vice president positions, several of them, in fact. And so now you're president, and you've got a team around you that you've partially, you know, built yourself. Can you speak a little bit in terms of you know, the cabinet and how that will work in what you're trying to accomplish in the years to come.
So anytime I hired somebody when I was in the advancement office, I would always say I'm looking for energy, effort, and enthusiasm. That's what I'd charge the search committee with. So many of the skills, you've got to learn them at some point, right? And we can teach you those skills. Now, fast forwarding to the cabinet level, we're not at the point that I want to be sitting down teaching a provost how to be a provost. That's evolved a little bit in some of the differences. But I still look for some of the same qualities, that energy, effort, enthusiasm. We know we are going to have hard days. We cannot be surprised by that. We know that the higher ed landscape is changing, and there are external variables that we can't control. We can't be naive and let that surprise us. And so I think that energy, effort, and enthusiasm starts my foundation. And then I don't have an E for this yet. Maybe we can work on this on the next podcast. But competence has to be in there. It has to be somebody that knows how to do the job. They have to have the experience. And so you got to come in with the right energy, the right attitude. You've got to have the confidence. You've got to be aligned with our mission, both our spiritual mission, but also our student-centered mission. And then just, there's not a one-word term for this, but you got to be able to shut that door and sit down with me and hash out an idea, argue, and still respect each other when you come out. We've got to be able to problem solve together. And our cabinet's doing a fantastic job sitting down, identifying problems, identifying opportunities. Let's talk through it. Let's work through it. Let's play pros and cons and devil's advocate and whatever it might be. And then we walk out of that room unified. And I think that's something very important. I think everybody knows that leadership's going to disagree at some point. Everybody knows that you're going to have a different opinion. But that unity, especially in a time of transition or a time of new leadership, that builds confidence. And I think confidence in leadership is one of the things that's critical when we're building something, when we're going through a transition. It kind of gives you that time to take a leap of faith or have folks take a leap of faith while you build the results that provides the proof.
Well, as you and the cabinet and the university as a whole work towards achieving the mission and moving the institution forward, we talked about this briefly earlier. There's a lot going on outside of the university and with higher ed. How are those pressures that are currently facing higher ed impacting your approach, your thoughts on your not only your day-to-day work, but your vision casting?
When we start talking about things like demographic cliffs or enrollment cliffs, we've been talking about that for 10 or 15 years in higher ed. This is an 18-year problem based on birth rate.
Yeah.
It's here. We've been talking about it. We can't act surprised that it's here. We have to modify. We have to adjust. And then just like any other business decision, we make this decision, we act it out, we evaluate it. The Air Force used to call it the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. So in higher ed today, especially small private institutions, enrollment is one of the areas that's a big focus, and it always has been, but especially now. That demographic cliff or that enrollment cliff is here. As I mentioned, we can't be surprised, but we have to start evaluating it. We have to look at it differently. Is it we must grow traditional undergraduate enrollment? That could be a goal. Is it we need to stabilize it and grow it in other areas? And I think these are questions we have to ask. If that pie is getting smaller, should we be getting a bigger piece of the pie, or should we pick up another pie and have two pies? But I think we have to start looking at things through a different lens. When we start looking at recruitment, what does our scholarship packages look like? What do our degrees look like? Back to the 3 R's we mentioned a minute ago with rigor, relevance, and rooted. Are we hitting all of those rungs on the ladder? When we're looking at business decisions, are we looking at how we manage our endowment properly? Are we looking at how we operationalize the institution and where we're putting resources? Student experience is something that we're really focused on. In a competitive landscape, customer service usually wins. You can probably, as you think about this, there are several businesses out there that you think are champions in their league. It's usually because they hit the customer service really, really well. And so we're taking a broad look at things. And to your point, it's changing rapidly.
Yeah.
And I think this is a time that we get to take the gloves off and look at it in a completely different light than we ever have. It kind of goes back to the definition of insanity. If we're just rinsing and repeating the same strategies over and over, I don't think the outlook is too bright. But we back to the cabinet again and the senior leadership and everybody on campus. there is a group of people here that are open to change and open to exploring different opportunities, and that's exciting.
Well, and that's so critical in navigating that current landscape, because when you see some of the schools that are really struggling, they're sort of stuck in that bubble and not looking at the bigger picture out there. And back to your point about looking at the right degrees or how are we serving our students. I hate to use the cliche thinking outside the box, but it is definitely, as you mentioned, thinking differently. Maybe it's other types of credentials. Maybe it's reaching students, former students who have graduated but now need the pivot, retool, upskill, and whatnot. And so, a lot of what you said really resonated with where does Gardner-Webb end up then in that landscape, that there's still a lot of uncertainty out there in the market of, what's going to stick and what's not.
And I think there's two key things that position Gardner-Webb well that get me excited. One is we've got people that are open to those conversations. We're having the conversation. All of those questions that I just listed are hypotheticals. What if? And we're willing to say those without being scared. But we've got a group of people that are willing to make that change if necessary, and we're nimble. That's the areas that we have a competitive advantage. There's book upon book upon book out there about change management. We have people that are willing to dive in head first to make the changes if they make sense. And that is a huge win. Again, being in a lot of different organizations, higher ed and not, people that are willing to make change when change needs to happen, that's a rarity.
Well, we've been talking about leadership, strategy, and a lot of serious stuff, and that's a technical term, serious stuff. Let's shift gears for a moment and get to know you, the person, a little better. And so that brings us to a special segment we'd like to call Office Hours, but this will be Office Hours President Edition.
There we go.
So I'm going to ask you a couple of quick questions. Don't think too much. Just what first thing that comes to mind. These should be good ones.
Don't think too much. There's irony in that.
Favorite sport to watch?
Gardner-Webb, period. Doesn't matter what it is.
Favorite movie?
I'm going to go back with We Were Soldiers. It's a classic. There's a lot of lessons learned and some historical context to that as well.
Early mornings or late nights?
Late nights. Can't stop once you get going. It just keep that momentum, that thought process going.
One place you go to recharge?
Anywhere outside. I love outdoors. I love hiking. I love just being out in the wilderness, so to speak.
And then one word you hope people use to describe Gardner-Webb?
Transformational. Academically, spiritually, personally, whatever it might be. Higher education institution. It's not just about the degree.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you. You're off the hot seat now. Thank you for...
Didn't study for that part.
That's not... they always tell you there's some tests you just can't study for.
No. Being a president.
Oh, isn't that the truth? Okay, so you come from a military background as well as advancement and now the presidency. How have all of those shaped the kind of leader that you are becoming?
Yeah, I think leadership, no matter the area, is the same. You've got to build trust. You've got to build that commitment. You've got to take care of your people, and you've got to have a focus. And I think those are the key pieces that you have to remember. And I can point back to things in the Air Force or ROTC, the attention to detail, the hospital corners, the how do you march, wear your uniform, all that stuff matters. Attention to detail is extremely important. Looking in higher ed, you can see that there as well. I'd boil that piece down to taking pride in your work. It's something that you want to see, whether it's that uniform, you want to have the best looking uniform, whether it's a report in the higher ed world, worked in the small business sector for a little bit on airplane propellers of all things. You really want good attention to detail there. That's kind of important. But that's the thing about leadership and teamwork, and it's such a melting pot of concepts and ideas that really to point to one thing is difficult. It taught me this. Well, yes, that all plays a role, and it just makes you into who the leader you become. Now being the president, I like to think I grow every day. I certainly learn something new every day. And so being the president, though, I do agree that suddenly you're bringing in all these different characteristics that you've learned along the way.
A word you said that I want to come back to is trust. And that is something within the last year, there have been some surveys, Gallup poll, and I think others with the Chronicle, that have noted just over time how the public's trust in higher ed has been dropping quite a bit. And one thing that I think is true is it's tough for higher ed to rebuild that trust externally if there are issues with trust internally. So how, both as a leader, but even as an individual, how, what are your thoughts in terms of one, that role of trust in the day-to-day operations of the university, and what does that mean in terms of how we function internally to achieve that to achieve trust?
Yeah, I think there's a couple pillars there. One is transparency. When you get administration, faculty, staff, top to bottom on the chain of command, if we're not communicating well, there can be just inherently like, why are they doing this? And so providing that transparency, usually there's a reason behind a decision. And I've learned that most of the time when you can explain and rationalize that direction, and when you're casting that vision or making that decision, if you can rationalize it for people, they usually understand. I also think the other piece in trust is not just in transparency, but in humanizing leadership. Yeah, there's a title. Yeah, there's an office. Yeah, there's a special regalia. But at the end of the day, this is Nate sitting up in the office working with the team of, insert all the names of cabinet, and these are humans. These are people who are highly qualified cabinet, for example. But at the end of the day, these are people who are making the best decisions they can make with the best interest of the institution at heart. And so sitting down, humanizing it, I've said it a couple times now, that cup of coffee, sitting down and having lunch, speaking to them in the caf. Sometimes it's picking up trash with them across campus after a football game. And I really think that goes a long ways in humanizing what leadership really is.
Gardner-Webb is a faith-based institution, as we've noted right now, in a very complicated higher ed landscape. What does it mean to you to lead a Christian university at this point in time?
Yeah, it's it's an honor. It's a heavy weight of stewardship responsibility, I feel, but I also think it's our superpower. If you look across the trust in higher education, as you're mentioning, and the public opinion of it, that's an ingredient in our recipe that not everybody has. Everybody's got your liberal arts. Everybody's got scholarship. Everybody's got career readiness. Not everybody has Christian values and Christian mission. And the education that we're providing and that extra dimension, if you will, has eternal ramifications. And, we had, the number escapes me, 50-some students baptized into Christ last year.
Wow.
I don't care what your degree is, that was the most important decision and test that they took while they were here. And it's countless numbers that the seed was either planted or watered while they were here. And so, yes, we hit the rungs on the ladder, the liberal arts, the degree, the career readiness, quality education, the rigor, whatever it may be. But again, we do have that superpower or that secret ingredient that's not really a secret. And so that gives me a lot of hope and excitement as we look at who we are as a Christian institution.
Well, as we start to wind down here, I got 3 more questions for you.
Okay.
So, the first one is, as you look ahead to your first full year as president, what do you most hope the Gardner-Webb community feels and experiences?
I would say, specifically for our students and the rest of the community, that they feel heard and supported and that their needs are being met. So if they're a student who came here for their degree to get a job, I hope that they feel like we helped them with that. If they're somebody who came here to explore what they want to be when they grow up, I hope that they had that support. If it's a faculty or a staff member, they're here many times. Yes, it's a job. Yes, it has a paycheck. but because they felt called to be here for a purpose. And so I hope that they feel that we nurtured that and helped them through that, and that ultimately, whether you're a student, staff, faculty, visitor, alum, that we support you in your spiritual growth and just your personal growth.
A question that we ask pretty much every guest on this podcast, if you could go back to yourself first year in college, what would you say?
Take every opportunity to learn everything you can learn. I think when I went through undergrad, it was very checklist oriented. You had your schedule. You had what you needed to complete. I met a lot of great people, a lot of great friends that I can call to this day, learned a lot in and out of the classroom. But to double down on those experiences when you don't have to go to a job, when you don't have these other responsibilities of life, to soak that up as much as you can.
Final question. You have the mic. Any final thoughts? Anything you want to leave with our listeners?
I would just say thank you to our students, our staff, faculty, alumni, friends, supporters, all of the above. Just thank you. You hear it all the time. We open the podcast with this. People are what make Gardner-Webb so special. And again, we can almost overuse that to the point it's cliche, but we couldn't do what we do without you. This place is meaningful, and you matter, and this place matters, and we need to do it together as one Webb, and the work that we're doing is meaningful. So thank you.
Well, President Evans, thank you again for taking the time to join me today and for the way that you've led Gardner-Webb through a season of real transition. Your willingness to step forward when the moment called for it and to lead with steadiness, faith, and care for this community has made a huge difference for our students, faculty, and staff. What I hope you all take away from this conversation is a deeper appreciation for the kind of leadership that often goes unseen. The work of holding an institution steady, investing in its people, and keeping the academic mission at the center is not easy, but it's what allows the university to move forward with confidence. Be sure to follow the Bulldog Mindset wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss future episodes. You can also visit us at gardner-webb.edu to learn more about President Evans, Gardner-Webb University, and the people and programs that make this community so special. As always, huge thanks to Noel Manning for the production wizardry behind the scenes and the reason why this podcast sounds polished instead of it sounding like it was recorded in my office. Until next time, keep leading with steadiness through every season of change and keep students and the academic mission at the center. This is the Bulldog Mindset.